Welcome back to Family Quiet Story. I'm so glad you're here with me today. Before we start, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It means a lot to this old carpenter to know how far these stories travel. This one is about a house I built with my own two hands, a daughter who tried to take it from me, and what happened when I decided I wasn't going down without a fight. Stay with me until the end. The taxi pulled up to my house on a Tuesday afternoon in late October. The maple trees I had planted the year my daughter was born were blazing orange and red, dropping leaves onto the lawn like tears. I paid the driver and stepped out slowly, my left leg still stiff from surgery. 3 weeks earlier, a drunk driver had run a red light and hit my pickup truck. I'd spent 12 days in a coma and another 9 learning to walk again. The doctors called it a miracle that I'd survived it all. I stood on the sidewalk, breathing in the crisp autumn air, looking at the house I had built back in 1984. Every beam, every nail, every piece of trim, I knew that house better than I knew my own heartbeat. I had carried my wife Ellen over that threshold the day we moved in. I had measured our daughter Sarah's height on the kitchen door frame every birthday until she turned 18. This wasn't just a house. It was 40 years of my life made solid. I limped up the walkway, my cane tapping against the stones I had laid myself. The front garden looked different. Ellen's rose bushes, the ones she had tended for 3 decades before cancer took her, were gone. In their place were some kind of modern ornamental grasses that honestly just looked like weeds to me. I frowned, but pushed the thought aside. Sarah probably thought she was helping, tidying things up while I was in the hospital. I reached the front door and pulled out my keys. The old brass key, worn smooth from decades of use, wouldn't fit. I tried again, thinking maybe my hands were just shaking from the medication. But no, the lock had been changed. A shiny new deadbolt sat where my old hardware used to be. I knocked on my own front door. Footsteps approached. The door swung open, and standing there was a man I barely recognized at first. Tall, soft around the middle, wearing a college sweatshirt and holding a beer. It took me a second to place him. Victor Harmon, my daughter's father-in-law. But it wasn't just his presence that made my blood run cold. It was what I could see behind him. Through the doorway, my living room had been completely rearranged. My old leather recliner, the one I'd sat in every evening for 20 years, was gone. In its place sat some massive sectional sofa in a color Ellen would have called vulgar. "Can I help you?" Victor asked, taking a sip of his beer. Looking at me the way you'd look at a lost delivery man. "Victor," I said, my voice weaker than I meant it to be. "It's me, Harold. What are you doing in my house?" His eyebrows went up slightly. "Oh, you're up and around already. Sarah said you'd probably be in physical therapy for another month." He didn't step aside. He didn't invite me in. He just stood there, blocking the doorway of my own home. "Where's Sarah?" I asked. "Where's my daughter?" "Out with Derek, shopping for nursery furniture." He smiled, but it never reached his eyes. "Big changes around here, Harold. Big changes." "What changes?" "Let me in. I need to sit down. My leg is killing me." Victor shook his head slowly, almost like he pitied me. "That's going to be a problem. See, there's no room for you here anymore. Brenda and I moved in last week. We're helping Sarah and Derek with the baby coming. And frankly, this house isn't suitable for someone in your condition. All those stairs, no grab bars in the bathroom, you'd be a liability." "A liability?" The word hit me like a physical blow. "This is my house," I said, my voice rising. "I built this house. I own this house." Victor chuckled, a patronizing sound that made my hands clench around my cane. "Not anymore, old-timer. Sarah handled all that while you were unconscious. Power of attorney. She's your legal guardian now. The deed's in her name. Has been for 2 weeks." The world tilted. I grabbed the door frame to steady myself. "You're lying. Check with the county clerk if you don't believe me." He took another sip of beer. "Now, I don't want to be rude, but Brenda's making dinner and I don't want it to get cold. Sarah packed your things. They're in boxes in the garage. Take whatever fits in a cab." "I'm not leaving my house." "It's not your house anymore, Harold." His voice hardened. "And if you don't leave the property in the next 10 minutes, I'm calling the police. You're trespassing." I stood there swaying slightly, trying to process what was happening. This couldn't be real. This had to be the medication. Some kind of fever dream. Then I heard barking. Biscuit, my 12-year-old golden retriever, came bounding around the corner of the house. She'd been staying with Sarah while I was in the hospital. When she saw me, she went wild, jumping up, licking my hands, whimpering with joy. "Hey, girl," I whispered, kneeling down despite the pain in my leg. "Hey, sweet girl." For a moment, holding my dog, I felt like everything might still be okay. Then Victor whistled sharply. "Biscuit, now!" Her ears flattened. She looked at me, then at Victor, confused and scared. "She's my dog," I said. "She's coming with me. That dog stays here. Sarah's attached to her. Besides, wherever you end up, they probably don't allow pets." I stood up, rage starting to burn through the fog of shock. "Where I end up? What are you talking about?" He smiled. "There's a nice facility about 20 minutes from here. Sarah's already made arrangements. A van is coming to pick you up in an hour." "A nursing home? You're putting me in a nursing home?" "It's an assisted living community," he corrected. "Very affordable, especially since you don't have any assets anymore." He patted my shoulder like I was a child being sent to bed. "Don't worry, Harold. You'll adjust. They all do eventually." I shoved his hand away. "Get your hands off me. I want to talk to Sarah, now." His face hardened. "Sarah doesn't want to talk to you. She's been through enough stress with the pregnancy and your accident. The doctor said your brain might have been affected by the coma. You might have episodes, confusion, aggression." He said that last word pointedly, glancing at where I'd pushed his hand away. "I'm not confused. I'm not aggressive. I'm being robbed. See, that's exactly what the doctors warned us about. Paranoid delusions." He stepped back inside. "1 hour, Harold. Get your things from the garage and wait for the van. If you cause any more trouble, I'll have you committed involuntarily. Sarah has the legal authority." The door slammed in my face. I stood there, chest heaving, leg throbbing, staring at the brass knocker I had installed myself 35 years earlier. Through the window, I watched Victor pick up his phone and laugh at something the person on the other end said. Biscuit was barking inside, scratching at the door. I turned and limped around to the garage. The side door was unlocked. Inside, stacked against the wall, were about a dozen cardboard boxes. My entire life reduced to cardboard. I opened one, clothes hastily thrown in, wrinkled and bunched. Another held books, spines cracked from being jammed together. The third made me stop breathing. It was Ellen's jewelry box, the mahogany case I had built for her on our 10th anniversary. I opened it with shaking hands. Empty. Every piece of jewelry she had ever owned. Every anniversary gift. Every heirloom passed down from her grandmother. Gone. I dug through the other boxes frantically. I found the photo albums, but half the pictures had been pulled out. I found my old tools, but my best ones, the antique hand planes my father had given me, were missing. Clothes, books, random kitchen items, but nothing of real value remained. They hadn't just taken my house. They had picked through my life and kept anything worth selling. I was still kneeling among the boxes when I heard tires crunch on the gravel. A white van pulled into the driveway, faded blue letters on the side reading a senior transport service. 2 men in scrubs got out, one carrying a clipboard. "Mr. Harold Whitmore," the one with the clipboard called out. I didn't answer. They walked into the garage. "Mr. Whitmore, we're here to take you to your new home. Your daughter signed all the paperwork. If you'll just come with us." "I'm not going anywhere." The 2 men exchanged a look. The big one without the clipboard stepped closer. "Sir, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. Your choice." "I have rights." "You have a legal guardian," the clipboard man said, "and she's authorized transport to a care facility. Now please, let's not make this difficult." I tried to back away, but my bad leg buckled. The big guy caught me, but it wasn't a gentle catch. He twisted my arm behind my back in one smooth motion, like he'd done it 100 times before. "Easy now, Grandpa. Don't want to hurt yourself." They marched me to the van. I shouted for help, but the neighbors' houses were far off, hidden by the very trees I had planted decades ago for privacy. Privacy that was now working against me. They shoved me into the back. It smelled like industrial cleaner and something worse underneath. The doors slammed shut, leaving me in darkness. The drive took 45 minutes. every pothole sending pain through my leg. When the van finally stopped, I saw a squat concrete building that looked more like a warehouse than a care facility. Half the letters were missing off the sign out front. They hauled me out and marched me through heavy doors. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of overcooked vegetables and something heavier, something like despair. In the lobby, a row of elderly people sat in wheelchairs staring at a television, bolted to the wall. Not one of them looked up when I came in. A large woman in nurse's scrubs met us at the front desk, her name tag reading Dolores. She didn't smile. "This the new admit?" she asked, barely glancing at me. "Daughter signed him in. Flight risk, possible cognitive decline." She nodded, making notes on a chart. "Room 7, end of the hall." "Wait," I said. "Please. This is a mistake. My daughter stole my house. I need to call a lawyer." Dolores looked at me with tired, empty eyes. "They all say that, honey. Room 7. Carlos will show you the way." Carlos was the big orderly who had twisted my arm. He grabbed my elbow and steered me down a long corridor lit by flickering fluorescent tubes, the walls a sickly green, the floor sticky under my shoes. Room 7 had 4 beds crammed into a space meant for 2. 3 were already occupied by men who looked like they'd given up on life years ago. "Home sweet home," Carlos said, shoving me toward the empty bed. "Dinner's at 5. Lights out at 8. Don't cause trouble." He left, locking the door behind him. I sat down on the thin mattress, springs groaning under me. Across the room, an old man muttered to himself, rocking back and forth. I looked at my own hands. These were the hands that had built 100 homes, the hands that had held my wife as she died, the hands that had cradled my daughter when she was born. Now they were shaking, useless. I should have cried. I should have given up. But somewhere deep inside me, beneath the shock and the pain, something else was stirring. Something cold and hard and patient. They thought I was finished. They thought they had won. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I survived the first night by not sleeping at all. I lay on that miserable bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling, and I planned. I had one advantage they didn't know about. When Ellen died 3 years earlier, we had just finished setting up a living trust with our lawyer, George Chen. Ellen had been worried about probate, about estate taxes, about making sure everything was organized properly. The house, my retirement accounts, everything of value had been transferred into the Whitmore family trust. And the trustee of that trust wasn't me as an individual. It was me as trustee, a legal distinction most people never think twice about. A personal power of attorney gave Sarah the right to act on behalf of Harold Whitmore, the person. But the house didn't belong to Harold Whitmore, the person. It belonged to the trust, and only I, as trustee, could ever transfer that property. If Sarah had used a power of attorney to sign a deed transfer, that deed was worthless from the start. She had stolen something she never actually owned. The only problem was proving it. I had no phone, no money, no way to reach George or anyone who could help. On the 3rd day, I found my opening. His name was Miguel, a janitor, maybe 25 years old, working the night shift. I noticed that every night around 2 in the morning, he'd duck into the supply closet near my room to check his phone, against the rules, but he did it anyway. I waited until the 4th night. When I heard his footsteps pass my door, I followed him, shuffling quietly through the dark. He was in the closet, his face lit by the glow of his screen. When I appeared in the doorway, he jumped, nearly dropping the phone. "Please," I whispered, "I'm not going to tell anyone. I just need help." He looked at me, then at the hallway, then back at me. "I can't get involved, man. I need this job." "I understand, but I've been kidnapped. My daughter stole my house and dumped me here. I just need one phone call. 5 minutes." "Kidnapped?" He looked skeptical. "They all say stuff like that. I know how it sounds, but I'm not crazy. I'm a carpenter. I built houses for 40 years. I had a car accident, and while I was in a coma, my daughter and her in-laws took everything I own." Something in my voice must have convinced him. He studied my face, searching for signs of confusion or delusion. "What do I get out of this?" he finally asked. I had nothing. They'd taken my watch, my wallet, everything. But then I remembered, when they stripped me and put me in a thin hospital gown, they'd been careless. They hadn't checked my neck. I reached under my gown and pulled out the chain I'd worn for 30 years. On it hung Ellen's wedding ring. I'd put it there the day she died and never taken it off since. It was the last piece of her I had left. I unclasped it with trembling hands and held it out. 14-karat gold. Small diamond, but real. Worth at least $2,000. Take it. Just let me use your phone. Miguel looked at the ring, then at me, and I think he saw the tears in my eyes. I think he understood exactly what I was giving up. He took the ring and handed me the phone. 5 minutes, he said. I'll watch the door. I dialed George Chen's home number from memory. It was 2 a.m, but he answered on the third ring, his voice groggy but alert. George, it's Harold Whitmore. I need your help. Sarah took everything. The house, the accounts. She put me in a home and I can't get out. There was a long pause. Harold, my God. Derek called me last week and said you had severe brain damage. Said you were in a vegetative state. Does this sound like a vegetative state to you? Another pause, then his voice went hard and professional. Tell me exactly where you are and what happened. I talked fast, giving him every essential detail. The forged deed transfer, the power of attorney they'd misused, the nursing home that was more like a prison. George listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said 4 words that made me want to weep with relief. The trust is intact. Harold, I drafted that trust. The house never belonged to you personally. It belonged to the trust. A personal power of attorney cannot transfer trust assets. Whatever deed Sarah signed is legally void. She doesn't own your house. She never did. I leaned against the wall, my legs weak. Can you get me out of here? I'll have an emergency motion filed by morning. I'll contact the state attorney general about elder abuse. His voice softened. Harold, I'm so sorry this happened. I should have checked on you the moment Derek called. Don't apologize, just get me out. Hold on, I'm coming. I handed the phone back to Miguel. He looked at me differently now, something like respect in his eyes. You weren't lying, he said. No, I wasn't. That lady on your ring, your wife for 42 years. He pressed the ring back into my hand. Keep it, man, I don't need it. But you helped me. You deserve something. Miguel shook his head. My abuela, she's in a place like this back in El Paso. I know what it's like to feel trapped. He started to walk away, then paused at the door. Give him hell, old man. George moved fast. By noon the next day, a sheriff's deputy arrived with a court order. Dolores tried to argue, tried to claim I was a danger to myself, but the deputy wasn't having any of it. This man is being released to his attorney immediately, he said, and the state will be conducting an investigation into the circumstances of his admission. I walked out of that building into the autumn sunshine, breathing free air for the first time in a week. George was waiting in the parking lot. He took one look at my dirty gown, my unshaven face, my hollow eyes, and his jaw tightened. Get in, he said. We have work to do. Over the next 2 weeks, I lived in George's guest house while we built our case. The deed Sarah had filed was fraudulent, signed using a power of attorney that never gave her authority over trust assets. The county recorder had accepted it at face value, but legally it was worthless. George also uncovered the financial trail. While I was in the coma, Sarah and Derek had drained my checking accounts, cashed out my retirement fund, and run up $60,000 in credit card charges under my name. Most of that money had gone straight to Victor and Brenda Harmon, supposedly for property improvements and caretaking expenses. All told, they had stolen over $300,000. But here was the twist that made George smile like a shark. They were planning to take even more. Through some quiet inquiries, George learned Derek had scheduled an appointment with a mortgage broker. They were planning to take out a large home equity line of credit against the house, pulling out several $100,000 more before eventually selling the property outright. They believed they owned it free and clear. They had no idea the title was tainted. We could stop them right now, George said one evening, spreading documents across his dining room table. File an injunction, freeze their accounts, have them arrested for fraud. How much would we get back? He shook his head. Maybe half. They've already spent a lot of it. Victor bought a boat. Brenda's been on shopping sprees. Sarah and Derek have been eating out every night, booking trips. I sat with that for a while. I thought about my daughter, the little girl who used to help me in the workshop, who used to fall asleep in my lap while I read her bedtime stories. How had she become this? Had she always had this in her, and I simply refused to see it? Or had Derek's family poisoned her against me a little at a time? What if we let them keep going? I asked slowly. Let them take out the loan. Let them spend more. And then take it all back. George's eyebrows rose. That's risky. And mean. They left me to rot in a nursing home. They stole my wife's wedding ring. They told everyone I was brain damaged so nobody would believe a word I said. I met his eyes. I want them to feel what I felt. I want them to lose everything. George studied me for a long moment, then nodded. I know a way. We created a fake lien. George set up a shell company and filed a document claiming I had taken out a private construction loan years earlier that was still unpaid, with interest and penalties bringing the total to $250,000. Completely fabricated, of course, but official-looking enough to create a serious cloud on the title, one that would stop any legitimate lender from approving a new mortgage. Then we sent a letter to Sarah and Derek. It said the shell company was preparing to foreclose on the property unless the outstanding debt was settled within 30 days. But as a courtesy, they'd accept a payoff of $175,000 to release the lien and clear the title. I knew exactly what they'd do. They were greedy and impatient. They had a mortgage broker ready to hand them hundreds of thousands, but they couldn't touch it until the title was clean. They'd pay anything to make the problem disappear. 3 days after the letter went out, the shell company received a wire transfer for the full amount, pulled straight from the money they'd already stolen from me, topped off with money borrowed from hard money lenders, and squeezed out of Victor's boat fund. They had paid me back with my own money, plus interest. The trap was set. Now it was time to spring it. Sarah had planned a housewarming party for the first Saturday in December, a winter celebration to show off their beautiful home to all their friends. Cocktails at 6, formal attire requested. George found the invitation online. I spent that week preparing. I got a haircut. I bought a new charcoal gray suit with a subtle pinstripe. I had my shoes shined until they gleamed. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a victim anymore. I saw Harold Whitmore, master carpenter, who had survived a coma and a betrayal and was about to take back everything that belonged to him. The evening of the party was cold and clear. Snow had fallen the night before, covering the lawn in a pristine white blanket. George drove us over. Behind us was a sheriff's deputy and an officer from the district attorney's elder abuse unit. We had the warrants, we had the evidence. We had everything we needed. The driveway was packed with expensive cars. Through the windows, I could see the party in full swing, well-dressed guests holding champagne, a small band playing, caterers circulating with silver trays. The house glowed with white lights and evergreen garlands. It looked beautiful. It looked like a thief's ball. We pulled up to the front door. I stepped out into the cold night air and rang my own doorbell. Sarah opened the door, wearing a red velvet dress and a string of pearls I recognized instantly. Ellen's pearls, the ones she'd worn on our wedding day. Sarah's face went white. "Dad," she whispered, You're supposed to be dead." "Drugged into a vegetable," I finished for her. "Sorry to disappoint you, sweetheart." I stepped past her into the house. The conversation died as guests turned to see who had arrived. I saw Derek freeze mid-laugh by the fireplace. I saw Victor choke on his drink. I saw Brenda clutch her purse like she was thinking about running. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly silent room, "I apologize for interrupting your evening, but I think there's been a misunderstanding about whose party this actually is." Derek stepped forward, his face flushing red. "What are you doing here?" "Sarah, call the police. He's trespassing." "Actually," George said, stepping in behind me, "Mr. Whitmore is the legal owner of this property. The deed your wife filed was fraudulent. The house belongs to the Whitmore Family Trust, and Harold is the sole trustee." Derek's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "Furthermore," George continued, "I have here warrants for the arrest of Sarah Whitmore, Derek Harmon, Victor Harmon, and Brenda Harmon for conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, theft, and filing false public documents." The deputy and the DA's investigator stepped through the door, handcuffs already in hand. "No," Sarah breathed. "No, this isn't happening. Dad, please, I can explain. Can you explain why you told everyone I was brain damaged? Can you explain why you stole $300,000 from my accounts? Can you explain why you took your own mother's jewelry and sold it?" My voice cracked on that last question. "Ellen's engagement ring, Sarah. The ring I saved 2 years to buy. You pawned it for $300. Tears were streaming down her face now. "I didn't. Derek said his parents needed—" "Don't you dare blame this on us," Victor snarled, but two deputies were already moving toward him. "This is entrapment. This is illegal. The only thing illegal here," the DA's investigator said calmly, "is what you did to Mr. Whitmore." She turned to the frozen, silent guests. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises. This is now a crime scene." The guests fled, grabbing coats, avoiding eye contact with me. Within minutes, the party had emptied out, leaving only family. Derek was handcuffed first, insisting the whole way there had been a mistake, that his lawyer would fix everything. Victor went next, red-faced and cursing. Brenda was crying, her makeup running in black streaks down her cheeks. Sarah was last. She stood in front of me, hands trembling, the pearls catching the light. My wife's pearls. "Dad," she said, "please, I'm pregnant. I can't go to jail. Think about your grandchild." I looked at my daughter and tried to see the little girl I had loved. The child who helped me build a birdhouse when she was 6. The teenager who cried on my shoulder when her first boyfriend broke her heart. The young woman who danced with me at her wedding. But that girl was gone. In her place stood a stranger who had left me to die in a concrete box that smelled like urine and despair. "The grandchild you were going to raise with stolen money?" I asked. "The grandchild who would grow up thinking it's okay to throw away family the moment they become inconvenient?" "I made a mistake. Derek's parents, they convinced me." "You were 42 years old, Sarah. You weren't a child being manipulated. You made a choice. You looked at your father, the man who built you this house, who paid for your college, who held your hand at your mother's funeral, and you decided I was worth less than money." The deputy stepped forward with the handcuffs. "Wait," Sarah said, panic rising in her voice. "Wait, please, Dad. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll give it all back. I'll do anything." I reached out and unclasped the pearls from around her neck. She flinched like I had struck her. "These were your mother's," I said quietly. "She wanted you to have them someday, but you were supposed to earn them. You were supposed to be worthy of them." I put the pearls in my pocket. "Take her," I said to the deputy. I watched them put my daughter in the back of a police car. I watched the lights flash against the snow. I watched the car drive away, taking the last piece of my old life with it. Then I went inside and sat down in a chair that wasn't mine, in a house that was, and I cried. 6 months later, the legal dust had finally settled. Sarah and Derek both pleaded guilty to reduced charges and received 3 years probation with mandatory community service. They had to sell their cars, cash out their retirement accounts, and liquidate nearly everything to pay restitution. Victor and Brenda got 18 months in minimum security. I sold the house. I couldn't live there anymore. It sold for $1.4 million, more than I expected. The new owners were a young couple expecting their first child, and I hoped they'd fill those rooms with happier memories than the ones I was leaving behind. I used some of the money to buy a small RV with room in the back for Biscuit. I'd gotten her back the day after the arrest, and she hasn't left my side since. I used more of the money to set up a scholarship fund in Ellen's name for kids who want to learn carpentry. The skilled trades are dying out, and I figured my legacy might as well be something useful. The rest went into a new trust, with George as co-trustee, so nobody could ever steal it out from under me again. On a warm morning in April, I pulled the RV out of the storage lot and pointed it west. I'd always wanted to see the Pacific Ocean. Ellen and I used to talk about driving out to California someday, but life kept getting in the way. Well, life wasn't getting in the way anymore. As I drove through the mountains, Biscuit asleep in the passenger seat, I thought about Sarah. She'd sent me a letter the month before, full of apologies and pleas for forgiveness. She said Derek's parents had pressured her, that she'd been scared about money with the baby coming, that she never meant for things to go this far. I hadn't written back. Maybe someday I will. But trust, once broken, is like a cracked beam. You can repair it, but it's never quite as strong as it was before. And I wasn't going to let anyone use me as a doormat again. I pulled over at a rest stop overlooking a wide valley, stepped out, and breathed deep. The air was clean and cold and full of pine. I thought about what I'd learned through all of it. Love shouldn't make you blind. Forgiveness shouldn't make you foolish. And family is something people earn through their actions, not something they get to claim just because of blood. I've built 100 houses in my life. Some were mansions, some were modest. But the most important thing I ever built wasn't made of wood and nails at all. It was my self-respect, and no one, not even my own daughter, had the right to tear that down. Biscuit jumped out and ran in circles, happy to stretch her legs. I laughed watching her, feeling lighter than I had in years. The road stretched out ahead of me, endless and open. No mortgage, no ungrateful family waiting around for an inheritance, no heavy secrets weighing me down. I climbed back into the RV and started the engine. If this story touched you, let me know in the comments what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have forgiven her or walked away for good? I read every single comment, and I truly love hearing from you. This has been Family Quiet Story. Take care of each other, and I'll see you on the next one.